my mother tried to instill in me a love of Mexico. And I was like, how is it that I live in the mecca of food in New York City and the Mexican food here sucks? And it was the tortilla. That was my inspiration. I said, look, if we can start making these type of tacos here, then there it is.
That was Fernando Ruiz, founder of Nixtamal. And this is Epicenter NYC. We connect our communities to news, information, and each other. I'm your host, Amber Castillo. Fernando Ruiz spent his childhood summers in Veracruz, Mexico, where he fell in love with fresh tacos, and which inspired him to start Nixtamal, a tortilla business using the traditional nixtamalization process in 2008 in Corona, Queens. Despite initial success, expansion challenges in the pandemic caused setbacks, but Fernando persisted, securing opportunities to sell at the US Open, Mets games at Citi Field, and the Queens Night Market. Looking forward, he hopes to get a spot at the proposed Metropolitan Park. Through all challenges, he remains dedicated to supporting his community and preserving his cultural heritage. Today, I sit down with Fernando to learn more about the story behind Nixtamal and how he transformed Queens' food scene with his authentic, heritage-infused tacos. Before we jump in, a quick message. Are you looking for a transformative experience that blends artistic action with collective healing? Look no further. Ways of Showing Up, a 2-day immersive event, is launching in New York City. Join us on Tuesday, July 9th and Wednesday, July 10th as we create space, build community, and inspire change together. Ways of Showing Up is presented by Epicenter NYC and the Department of Transformation at the Performing Garage. For the full agenda and other details, click the link in our show notes. Now back to the show. Here's my conversation with Fernando.
My full name is Fernando Ruiz, and I am founder of, now called Taqueria Nixtamal, but originally it was Tortilla Nixtamal.
Yeah, could you talk us through how and when you started the business?
It's been a pivot, but when I first started the concept, it was actually 2008 in Corona, Queens, right here on 47th Avenue and 104th Street.
So what was the connection to Corona, Queens?
It was simple. I had a half brother that was moving here from Mexico, and I didn't want him to come here and get exploited. At the time, I was a young New York City firefighter. I was actually the only Mexican firefighter in New York City. When I first grew up in New York, there wasn't a lot of Mexicans. I mean, Corona was still Italian. Do you know what I mean? I grew up in Brooklyn, but my parents came here in 1969. We actually moved to the Upper West Side because that's where my mother's business was. We were there for a couple of years, and then we moved out to, believe it or not, to East New York. But it was tough because the time that we moved into East New York is when it was changing for the worse. But my uncle got a really good deal on a house. I think he paid like $16,000 for a house in 1980.
What business did your mom have?
My mom was a hairdresser. She came to New York because she wanted to work aboard a cruise ship and wanted to be a hairdresser and on a cruise ship, and the cruise ship left from New York. But she actually had a business in Mexico, but in order to pay for the trip and everything, she sold her business. So once the whole cruise thing, I mean, you can't live aboard a cruise ship, was over. She says, I got nothing to come back to, so I might as well stay in New York. And
was there anything about your mother's story that helped you with,
In a matter of saying, it did, because I knew that my brother was coming, right? And my brother was basically being told by my father that because I grew up with my stepfather, but my father was a politician in Mexico, and they had money, and he never really taught him how to work. And so eventually they gave up on him, and they're like, you got to go because we're not going to support you anymore. The bank is closed. He went to Canada. He calls me up, and because I had gone down a couple of times just to meet them. We really didn't have a relationship, but he followed some girl to Canada because supposedly he was going to work for her father's construction company, but he was unable to get a visa. So he calls me up. He goes, look, Fernando, I'm in Canada. I have no money. I have nowhere to go. I said, okay. I sent the money for a plane ticket. He shows up, and the very next day, he was a busboy. I found him a restaurant job in Manhattan. I said, you're coming to work. There's no handouts here. My little apartment, I actually built a bed for him above my kitchen. So we actually had a 2 bedrooms loft, but it was basically just the bed on top of another bed. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that he's saying that I'm not his father, but I was the person that made him a man. This is an immigrant life. You have to come and you have to work. There's going to be no free handouts. I think I got that from my mother, that sense of there's always work.
With Nixtamal, like why did you think it was a good idea, or like what was the inspiration behind actually?
The inspiration, like I said, partly was because my brother was coming and he said, why don't I was a New York City firefighter at the time, right? And I don't know if you guys know, but New York City firemen work only 2 days a week. But we work 2 24-hour shifts. So it's the equivalent of 40 hours, right? So I had 5 days off. I said to him, look, there's a big, large growing population of Mexicans in New York now, and there's no tortilla. And I'm like, look, I can't afford to open this in Soho because I can barely afford to pay my rent, let alone open a storefront. But that's not the demographic that we were trying to reach anyway. So why not go to Corona? I mean, Corona, it sounds Mexican, right? And what I was paying for a storefront is what most people were paying for rent in Manhattan. And I said, you come work for me and we'll take it from there. And that's where the inspiration. And at the time, my girlfriend was a business consultant. So she quit her job. I said, look, I have a full-time Fortune 500 business consultant that's going to help me open this up. I have cheap labor because I have my brother. So why don't we start it? And so we decided, even not knowing what to do. And most people were saying, why are you going to do Nixtamal when you can just buy the powdered stuff? That's what made us different than everybody else. You've heard of number one tacos. They're making tortillas by hand, but they're using maseca. Not a lot of people use Nixtamal because you have to get specific corn. You have to cook it. You have to grind it. So that's where the word tamal comes from. So Nixtamal. So that dough makes tortillas, it makes tamales, and it makes pozole. Pozole is hominy. It's what you get before you grind the corn. So that was my idea. I never did it. I never realized we were the only ones doing this. But that's how I got the inspiration. And I wanted to keep the people that I cared about close. And I wanted to take care of them. I didn't want them to go off and work for somebody else. And since I couldn't be there all the time because I still had a full-time job with the city, that's where Nixtamal started.
Is this something that you grew up knowing about, like just watching family members make it, or?
It's so funny that you ask because they always ask me this question. You know what? The thing was? My mother tried to instill in me a love of Mexico because I feel like a lot of children come here and forget where they're from. I have cousins that can't even speak Spanish. And I think it's a shame, but I grew up going down to Mexico. And as soon as I got off the plane, I would go to the nearest taco cart and have like 14 tacos. I'm not exaggerating. And I was like, how is it that I live in the mecca of food in New York City and the Mexican food here sucks? And it was the tortilla, because the preservatives gives the American tortilla shelf life, but it kills the flavor. So I was like, how is it that this meat that's hanging out in the street in the sun all day, you know what I mean, in a cart, and some of them have flies all over the place, how does this taste so much better than a restaurant? That was my inspiration. I said, look, if we can start making these type of tacos here, then there it is. You know what I mean? That's where I got the inspiration. And it's not that my mom was making nixtamal at home. My mom was very traditional, but to make nixtamal at home is like abuelita stuff. Like, it's a process. And that's why big companies stay away from it, because they want to be able to make a ton of tortillas, stick them on a shelf, and not worry about it. If you put your stuff in a supermarket and it doesn't sell, you got to buy that back from the supermarket. There's no big business in it, which is what I ended up learning the hard way.
Is your wife, she's very involved in this business, no?
Well, yes, I had to pivot from Corona, because, honestly, it went through our heads about how, people loved our restaurant and stuff, but we always kept telling ourselves that we needed to be in a better location. So a big developer came, scooped us up, and took us to Manhattan. And it was the worst decision I could have ever made. We officially opened in 2019 in something I don't know if you've ever heard of called the Market Line. You've heard of the Essex Market on the Lower East Side? All right. Well, the Essex Market used to be this old city market down on Delancey Street, but these mega rich millionaires convinced the city to let them move it across the street to this development. And this development was three basically huge buildings that were going to interconnect underground. And it was going to be New York's largest market. And they were trying to compete with like Pike's Market in Seattle and, the market in Istanbul. Like they wanted it to be known as New York's premier, underground market. And they also told us that they were building the low line, and I was a firefighter in Soho, right? And I was first due to the High Line. And I saw how that whole neighborhood changed because that used to be the meatpacking district. And the meatpacking district back when I was young was, let's just say nobody went there except, butchers and stuff. But I saw how that whole neighborhood changed, and I thought we were getting in on this great ground floor thing there. But they just really didn't know what they were doing, and they made all these promises, and then the pandemic. We were open for 3 months, right? So come 2020, we were deemed non-essential, so we were shut down for a year. In 2021, they reopened. We were part of a collective, right? And the developers had a big bar called the Grand Delancey, and our part of the market wasn't allowed to open, but we were still a food option at the bar. So me, my wife, and my kids would go there just to cook for the bar because my kids were still being homeschooled, because schools hadn't really reopened either. So basically, I set up tents. I mean, I set up camping cots in the back of my stand so my kids could be there, while me and my wife just cooked for the bar to try to keep the concept alive. But in 2021, we slowly went to reopening. But by 22, I began to think this is just never going to be what it was. But then something great happened because of our connection with a fellow Latino at the market who did the Wi-Fi. He goes, hey, the US Open is looking for a taqueria. Would you be interested? So my wife pivoted. She started her own company, and she makes something that's really popular now. It's called birria. I know you know what that is. Birria tacos. So we, my wife created her recipe. I'm told that it's even better than Birrialandia. And we're trying to come back to where it all started in Corona, but it's tough, But the great part is that we have found a great friend. We have two great friends. We debuted it in 2022 at the US Open, right? We had one stand. That one stand outsold 4 combined stands that the US Open people operated. We sold more than their 4 stands together. So the next year, they gave us all the stands. So we had close to 6 locations at the US Open last year. And when we debuted at Center Court, which is Arthur Ashe Stadium, guess who reached out to us the next day? The New York Mets. And they said, would you be a part of Metropolitan Park, which is the $8 billion project that they're offering to build right outside the Citi Field? But it gets even better. They're like, in the meantime, would you mind starting inside the stadium? I was like, of course, who's going to turn down, an opportunity to work with the Mets? But the vice president of the Mets came to see me at the Queens Night Market, because we do that. As soon as we started talking, they had me cater. Last year, they had me cater the owner's suite where we got to meet Steve Cohen. They fell in love with my wife's mole. It's the original mole recipe that when mole was invented in Puebla. This man who is a millionaire, like he just said, Fernando, whatever you need, I got you. And I said, you know what I really want? I really, of course, want to succeed with you guys. But I don't want to have to lay off 100 of my people every year when the US Open is over. I want to be able to employ these people because my heart goes out to them because a lot of them can't find jobs or they're just new to this country. Like I said, we had over 100 employees last year, but the US Open is only 3 weeks. But I'm very proud to say that we were one of the highest paying jobs at the Open. You know, we paid more than the actual people, and most of them were averaging anywhere between $6,000 to $7,000 for 3 weeks work. So, but I would love to be able to say, hey, you know what? I got jobs for you all year round. And right now we've also found a home here at Queens College, but because of our relationship with the Queens Night Market, Queens College reached out to them and said, would you guys be interested in trying to make a go of it here at Queens College? So right as soon as the US Open was over last year, we started making our presence known here at the college, and it's beginning to work out. The unfortunate part is that the school hasn't made a decision on who they're going to give the cafeteria to, but we're very happy here in the Student Union building, and it's our home. You know, this is our base of operations right now, and we're actually trying to start an incubator kitchen here for high school students with Francisco Moya. Moya is also, what a great guy. I didn't even realize that Moya was the one who told the Mets, this is my guy. You know what I mean? You gotta work with him. So Moya has also, said that we're going to be part of the soccer stadium that's been approved. So Nixtamal will be inside the soccer stadium. And the Mets have, I think, continue the story. His name is Michael Sullivan, and we met with him. And not only that, but I met with the consultants who were hired last week, who were hired to start the process about who's going to go into the food hall. And you know what these guys told me? They said, look, the Mets told us that whatever you need, you're the number one guy. I'm not trying to brag, but it was I was like, and I'm not at Citi Field. I'm next to Shake Shack. I'm next to the largest Shake Shack in the world. They have 24 cash registers, right? I'm not anywhere near that level. But for the Mets to suddenly say that to these guys, so we're there at Citi Field. We just finished our second semester here at Queens College. We're going to be here during the summer. And the great part is that we're also hopefully going to start working with the Hall of Science. We have a meeting with them next week, and hopefully we can be the kitchen in residence at the Hall of Science. We haven't confirmed the US Open for this year, which is a little disheartening because we had 6 stands last year, but I just can't keep depending on Nixtamal needs a home. You know what I mean? And honestly, whoever reaches out first, is where we're going to go.
Usually the last question we ask small business owners and entrepreneurs, you mention it at different parts, but like, what does being, a small business owner mean to you? What does being an entrepreneur mean to you? Like, what does that mean for your community as well?
For me, it means independence. And I think, like I said, I got that from my mother. But I think it's important because like I said, I feel like I have a responsibility to the community because I've been here for so long. You also have a responsibility to show them that it doesn't matter where you come from. I mean, it matters where you end up. And you don't do it by asking for handouts. I mean, you do it by hard work. And there's nothing greater than working for, like right now, my kiosk is open. I'm here at Queens College, but I'm able to sit down and have a 2-hour conversation with you because I'm the boss. I mean, and that's freedom.
You can find Nixtamal online at nixtamal.nyc and on Instagram by searching for Taqueria Nixtamal. We've linked to both in our show notes. If you know of a local business that you think Epicenter should feature, let us know. Drop us a note at hello@epicenter-nyc.com. That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting us as we do our best to support our community. We couldn't do it without you. For more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at epicenter-nyc.com. Our intro music is All the Pretty Horses by Karavika. You can find more of their music on their website, linked to in our podcast description.